Are you looking for a more horror-based, gory gunathon in a Doom style? Well then, Unloved might be the game for you. Unloved is a very gritty action horror FPS, and has some survival elements as you try and survive waves, but it can be both single player and multiplayer, and you can basically just join people from the lobby straight into the game wherever they're at in their sort of level. Or you can just play it single player and go through the level yourself. Basically every match starts with you coming up in an elevator, and then there's 4 keys and 4 different areas that you have to open up throughout the map. What's unique about it is the maps are actually randomly generated, but in blocks, so each little tile, or like a square on the map, is actually like an assortment of rooms and a little area that's part of the whole map basically, and it just spawns these squares in. You can choose whether you want to have one theme. There's like a town theme, a hospital theme, or you can twist them together and have lots of themes all in one map, but each square will likely have a different theme, or at least most of them will be different. A lot of the action does take place in quite tight corridors and in sort of more claustrophobic areas, so if you are claustrophobic it might be a little daunting, but there are some areas which are more open. There's sometimes graveyards underground in a more open space, and sometimes there's stairs down or stairs up, and there is a sort of 3D plane to the game. It does almost play very much like the old sort of Doom games and everything, the shooters that came before the fully 3D games, and that's actually quite a breath of fresh air. It's also extremely dark, and the characters that you're fighting, these sort of like horrors, they're meant to be, you're meant to be stuck in a nightmare basically, and there's different sets of creatures, and they're almost like demons, I guess. There's one that's a clown that fires missiles, there's a giant butcher like a surgeon, and yeah, there's just loads of different horrors in there. But the easiest one, the sort of like the pawn of the enemies, is sobbing, so you can hear the sobbing faintly just around the corner, just across the wall from where you're at. And it's actually quite scary the first time or first few times you play it, until you realise that you're gunning down so many of these demons, or well, nightmares, that you're just basically a badass, so they're not so much scary anymore, rather than a target to shoot at. But with only a very dim flashlight and very dark, very claustrophobic spaces, it does convey a horror element more than games in the past of other Dooms would really. It's actually quite scary at times, and if you're playing on your own, you might get a little freaked out. In a good way, of course. The reason to keep playing is that there are unlockables as you go through the levels called trinkets, and they can add, say, extra bullets to your gun, or certain extra damage types, and basically upgrade your character as you level up, and you can take on harder levels. And the idea is that you keep leveling up and try and take on higher challenges and higher levels and higher enemy types, and that's the way that the game really pans out. And some of the trinkets can be found inside the game, opening up chests and things like that. So there is some element of wanting to go around the whole map, not just skipping stuff and doing the whole level. The game looks pretty good. The Steam page does say it was built on the Unreal Engine 4, but I'm not 100% sure if that's right. I'm guessing if they say it is, then it's right, but it's not exactly the best looking game. It's very gritty, I'd say, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And because it's so dark, you don't need mega textures or anything like that anyway, and the game does generally look fine. It looks good. It basically does what it sets out to do, and I think it might look quite a lot like the Dark Souls game. If you look at the Dark Souls graphics and the textures, they have this sort of like very grimy, gritty look to them, and that can be seen here too, and it definitely does add to the horror aspect. But whether the textures are great quality, I don't think so. It's gritty but good. Also, eventually, as you start clearing out corridor to corridor, the corridors will be less textured with their own gritty textures, but with the carpet of blood and, you know, you name it, across the walls. But most of the map will be red after you've started to exterminate these horrors. The gunplay in the game is okay. I think that the shotgun is very fun to use and is something that feels like it has a good response, but there's a nail gun that's almost like a chain gun, a normal SMG, and the pistol. The only thing is with the weapons, they don't feel really tight and they don't have as much feedback as I'd usually like in games. I'd say that they're almost a bit floaty, or it's hard to put a word on it, but they don't feel like they have the punch or they fit incomplete with the game, especially the SMG. It's got a silencer on it, but the question is, why does it have that silencer on it? Was it just because it was put in because the designer thought it was cool, which is fine, that's fine, but I just felt it wasn't quite in place with this sort of gory, very dark world, whereas the shotgun, just with 2 barrels, very much did fit in with this very haunting experience where you'd get your hands on some like gritty double-barreled shotgun maybe. It's easy to overlook this once you get started playing and you're killing so many enemies that you don't care too much on how the guns feel, rather than the fact that you're actually mowing all these enemies down. Something worth mentioning is that your character is this sort of middle-aged guy with some glasses on, and everybody is this character. There's no custom. It does, at least I've got a few levels in, and I've been to higher level matches and I haven't seen a different model, so I'm guessing everybody has this model. And whilst it's just one of those things again, I mean, it's all little things, that this is the only character you have in the game, and you can customize the colours, but it's just like, it's almost, I don't want to use the word unprofessional, but I mean the character is almost comical in that you're all this dude. But it would be really nice to have some customization and just some, and again, I don't know whether it 100% fits in. There's another cool mode that I really enjoy playing, which is the hot mode, which is only single player, but basically, like super hot, you can slow down time whilst you're not moving. So if you don't move, the time will go almost at a standstill, very, very slowly. So you can go from shooting, get at one monster, dodge another's bullets, and fire another one in sort of like a very cool actiony slow-mo way, and it's extremely satisfying to watch the bodies fly and then suddenly time speed up and you shoot across and then dodge a big fiery ball that's coming towards you. The co-op is fun too, especially if you get into a good game where you know that they have the same ping as you. Most of the community is extremely kind, offering you guns that they find on the floor, just explaining to you the mechanics, or just generally being friendly, apart from one that kicked me straight away saying I was a noob, but you expect somebody to be the bad apple in these games. So as we're talking about the co-op, I just thought I'd start the criticisms here. So there's a problem with the co-op mode in that you join just on the player's name. You don't see where they're based, or what sort of ping they have compared to yours. So when you join one, it's a bit of a potluck as to whether you'll get a server where you're going to be lagging to hell, or maybe it'll be a fun experience. So it's a lottery as to what experience you'll have joining a multiplayer game. Another thing that may get very old quite quickly, especially if you're playing, is that the fact that these maps are modular and they're randomized, but there aren't too many sets of these tiles that make up the map. As I mentioned before, they're sort of like squares in the map and make up like a jigsaw of these little environments. Most of them are very claustrophobic and are basically just a tight corridor, so really you could become sick of it quite quickly. And this is the same with the enemies as well, I'd say. There are a nice set of enemy types, but once you've taken them all out, all that happens is you get a slightly harder version of that enemy type. There's like a rotten version of the enemy type, which is a super strong version. That's slightly tweaked version of that enemy. Obviously, as you get higher level, there's more enemies and more harder types, but it just is another thing that may become very samey very quickly, and you might get bored of, I guess. It's just something else that might grind on you, especially if you're getting bored of fighting the same monsters over again, wave after wave. But, as I said before, the initial taking on so many enemies is extremely fun, and I enjoyed all the time that I've played it. The enemies also don't have an exact sort of method of taking them down that sets each enemy type apart. I mean, the witch in the game kills you by looking at you, basically like it sort of makes your screen go quite black and then does damage to you. And a lot of the enemies have fireballs that they throw at you, almost Doom style, and they are quite, and one of them has a homing missile sort of fire, and some of them fire several at once, but you're generally just fighting these fireballs or an enemy coming close to you and trying to hit you or slash you. And there isn't sort of like a special way to take them down or a weak point that they have. Most of the time it's just firing and trying to move away as much as possible. So there might be that element as well that you could grow tired of, in that you don't have enough variety. All in all, I enjoyed my time in Unloved. It does have a small team with only 4 people in the main development, 2 artists, 1 music composer and 1 coder, and what they've done is very impressive for the small team. It's also not massively expensive on Steam. It's set at $10.99 UK sterling, that's £10, to £11 even, and at the moment it's 40% off, so £6.59. It's not a massive cut into into your wallet, and I think they've got the pricing right, or at least at the moment whilst it's $6.59, it's right on the money, in that it's a fun experience, but it's definitely not a AAA title, that's for sure. And in some ways there's a lot going on in the game, but not all of it is completely fleshed out or done, not professionally, but to a standard that you'd expect in a AAA game. But the game as a whole works, and there's a lot to do, and you can have a lot of fun, especially if you like these kind of wave games and don't get easily bored by doing similar tasks. Some people enjoy sort of wave games like The Killing Floor and Left 4 Dead, I guess. So if you're looking for something to play that isn't too expensive, that sort of matches those games, this is definitely something to consider. And it's now completely released, it's not in early access anymore. It's obviously got a strong community around it that have liked the game for a long time, as what drew me to it was I saw this new game was released, as I normally sort of scroll through the new releases on Steam to see if something special is coming out, and the reviews were very positive. Anyway, what does everyone else think? Has anyone else played Unloved? Is anyone giving it a go? Or is it just not something for you? Be sure to let me know in the comments section below. If you thought this video was loved, give it a like. If you thought it was unloved, give it a dislike. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Thank you all very much for watching. Until next time, Joshino.